A slob comes clean expert, Dana K.White, is here on our show with us today, and I'm super excited because I've been a fan for a very long time. I'm Angela Brown, and this is Ask a House Cleaner. This is a show where you get to ask a house cleaning question, and I get to help you find an answer. Now, I'm super excited about today's show because there's a woman, Dana K.White, who is on her own personal journey of decluttering and getting organized in her own personal home. So she decided she would document the process in what was a way of learning how to teach herself to blog. And the blog turned into this massive YouTube show and a massive podcast, best-selling books, courses, the whole 9 yards. But one of the things that really intrigued me is she joined the industry of decluttering and organizing anonymously. And she was trying to fly under the radar and go behind the scenes. But truth be known, she's one of the brightest minds in marketing that I've seen in this space. Everything from day one that she did was branded. It was all tagged into the same fonts and the same colors, and she had her press kit down. And I looked at her stuff and I'm like, who is this Dana K.White? This woman is a master at marketing. What on earth is she doing in the organizing and decluttering space? But I'll tell you what, she's partnered the two together in one of the most profound businesses that I've seen in this decade. So please help me welcome, with a joyful conversation to see the behind the scenes on how she got started, Dana K.White from A Slob Comes Clean.
Dana K.White. I put the K in there because there's another Dana White who's like an ultimate fighting champion. And that's not me. I have a website and podcast and all sorts of different things online under the name A Slob Comes Clean. I actually started that in 2009. So it's been over 10 years now. And I really just wanted to write. I wanted to be a writer. That was always my goal. So when I found out what blogs were, I thought, well, that's it. I've got to have one. And I didn't start for a year and a half after I found out what they were because my house was a disaster, like a complete and total disaster. And it had always been a disaster. I'd always thought that once I was a stay-at-home mom, that my house would magically be clean. Because I mean, what else was I going to have to do? Right. And after I became a stay-at-home mom and really honestly trying very hard to get my house under control, and continually having it go back to being a disaster, sometimes usually worse than it was before I was, so focused on it. I was just completely overwhelmed and frustrated. So I started this blog called A Slob Comes Clean. It was completely anonymous in the beginning. It was meant to be a practice blog because I wanted an excuse to go ahead and start. The reason I hadn't started was that I didn't want to take any more focus away from my home because that was such a constant frustration for me. And I know that I throw myself into projects and I knew it would just be one more thing to distract me from working on my home. So I started that. It was anonymous. I was being completely honest. I was like, you know what? I mean, when I said a slob, and I'd always said I'm not a slob, but I was, but when I used that word and I was anonymous, I was done making excuses. I was like, okay, I really am that desperate. I have to figure this out. And so I just started writing about what I was doing in my home, why I was resisting doing certain things, what I was figuring out really had an impact versus what I'd always done before and why it didn't have the impact that I had thought it would have and all that. And while I thought that the people who eventually found it would be horrified by what I was writing, instead it turned out that there were a lot of women out there who struggled the way that I did. And they started saying, oh my goodness, what you're saying is exactly what goes through my head. This is how it works in my house. And I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I have been told, I think we were separated at birth. I think we're long lost twins. I never knew there was someone out there who thought the way that I did. And so I hear it from people all the time. And I love that because that's what happened to me when people started saying, that's my experience. What you're going through, what you're saying is exactly what goes on in my house. And I had that same, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. So I just kept working on my own house. I called it my deslobification process. And as I did that, I did start figuring out what had an impact, like what it was that I'd been doing wrong, what it was that I needed to do. I boiled it down to, okay, please tell me exactly what I have to do. I figured that out. And then eventually, actually pretty early on, people were like, tell us what to do. And I was like, I'm not telling anybody what to do because this is a struggle I've had my whole life. Are you crazy? Who'd want to learn from me? But after about 2.5, 3 years, it hit me. I wrote my first ebook called 28 Days to Hope for Your Home. And because I kept telling people, no, people want to know how to be perfect, and I'll never know how to tell someone how to do that. But then it hit me that, okay, I can't tell someone how to have a perfect home all the time, but I can totally tell you from my experience what you have to do to go from being completely overwhelmed to, okay, I can do this. I get it now. And so that's what that was. And then that has then morphed into, I have two traditionally published books now that are, everywhere, audio, Kindle, all the different formats. So, 28 days is included in the first one. Second one is Decluttering at the Speed of Life, which that one has really made a big impact and has, because that's the thing I own at this point. I own that I am a decluttering expert. I still feel really weird when people call me a cleaning expert.
It's the reason why your book, Decluttering at the Speed of Life, made it to the Savvy Cleaner top 10 list for dehoarding in 2019.
I mean, it's based on what I did in my own home and breaking through those mental blocks, because those mental blocks are huge. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I have had to work through my own stuff. And because I was writing about it as I was working on my stuff, I was figuring out those resistance points and what it was I needed to do and how to break this down. Because here's the thing, most organizing advice is written by organized people who like organizing. When someone says, "Oh, do you love organizing?" I'm like, "No, I hate it. That's the point." I'm like, "This is not fun to me." But I like teaching and I like helping people. And so using my experience lets me do that. But yeah, it comes from the perspective of someone who really had to work through those issues, which is why it's been very helpful for a lot of people.
Well, I love the fact that you documented your progress as you went. I remember listening to one of your early podcasts, and you were walking through your house and you were cleaning things and you were figuring stuff out. And I was in my car, like shopping at Walmart or something. And I wasn't in my house, but I was walking through my house as you were walking through your house. And I was thinking, oh, yes, I probably do have stuff on my kitchen counter. Oh, yes, I probably did leave some mail out. And I was walking through some of those same ideas that you were sharing on your podcast. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and the difference that it's made and about your journey with that.
I had gone to a blogging conference at the time, still thinking I was going to start my real blog, at some point. I started the podcast because podcasting sounded fun to me. Like I was a theater arts teacher. And so talking into a microphone is like my happy place, So I just heard, I'd never listened to a podcast before I started it. I just had gone to this class and somebody had said something that made a real impact on me. And that was, you don't have a blog, you have a message. And so it's not, because I'd always thought, okay, I want to start a YouTube channel. I want to start a podcast and do all that. But, what am I going to do to get my blog readers to listen? Well, that's not the issue. You've got blog readers and you've got podcast listeners. And so take the same message that you've been sharing through written form and then put that into a podcast. And so I did that, not really knowing how it was going to go. And it's amazing to me the impact of a podcast because it's very intimate. So people feel like they know me, so like when I meet people in real life now at a speaking event or something, I would say the vast majority listen to my podcast. Like those are the people who show up at things because there is just such a personal relationship. The other thing too is it pairs so well with cleaning. What I'm talking about is something that you can do as you're listening. And so it just goes really well together.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought this up. There are so many people that are going through at the beginning of the year here, New Year's resolutions, and they're deciding that they want to declutter and they want to get organized and they want to put their lives back together again. And I felt like having you on the show today would just be a gem because your story has really taken you through the process, not only of a place of documenting it as you go, but you've got a huge YouTube channel that was live and well even before YouTube really was a thing. And then podcasting in your books, and now you have courses. And we're out of time today. I would love to have you back on the show because I know that you happen to have a whole system on the difference between decluttering and organizing. And we would love to talk about that in another episode. But please tell our listeners where to go. I know you've got some courses, books, all that kind of stuff.
If you go to aslobcomesclean.com, you're going to find everything there. You've got links to my podcast and my 5-day clutter shakedown, my books, all that kind of stuff. The books are called How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind and Decluttering at the Speed of Life. And they're everywhere books are sold.
Alrighty, and that was Dana K.White from A Slob Comes Clean. I'm going to leave links in the show notes to her podcasts and her books and her YouTube channel and her courses and all that stuff because you guys have to get to know her. She's amazing and she's got a wealth of information. So if you've ever even slightly thought about decluttering your home, Dana K.White is a person you need to know. Alrighty, if you found this helpful, please pass it on to a friend. If we've earned your subscription, please subscribe. And until we meet again, leave the world a cleaner place than when you found it.